It would probably help if I pushed the right unmute button. In any case, wherever you are, whatever the time is, it's obviously bedtime. Hello and welcome. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're able to join us for story time on this fine Wednesday evening. Or, whatever the day and time it is for you. Hey, Gecko, I'm glad you made it. I'm really glad to see you. Gecko was schooling me earlier on Magic the Gathering and whipping my noob deck that I put together. It was a lot of fun, but she kicked my butt several times. She's got a bunch of OP cards. In any case, we are going to be doing the giveaway starting next month. So it's going to be kind of a scavenger hunt format where I ask a question during the stream, during the intermission time, and then you guys will have to go look for the answer and then send me a message on the Discord to me directly, not in a chat channel, because you don't want to give away the answer to anybody, with both the question and the answer. It's very important. You need to include both the question and the answer, because you do not have to answer the question the day of the stream. You can come and watch one of the recordings, one of the VODs, on either the Twitch or the YouTube, doesn't matter which, and you can answer it at any time during the month. So you have until the very last day of January to submit your answers to me. So, very important that you include the question, because otherwise I might not know which question you're answering. And then whoever has the most points at the end of January from these questions will get a game off of Steam that the community plays together. Which does mean you'll have to add me as a friend on Steam. I'm very sorry. I know that's a high price to pay and a high burden, but you'll have to grit your teeth and bear it in order to get the loots. So, you have to be friends with me on Steam. I am so sorry for you. You might even get invited to a game once in a while to game with me, and then you can school me like Gecko did. All right. Well, we are getting back into the regular reading cycle. Yesterday we picked back up with Conan. Today it is Murder on the Links. Panda, it's too late for you. I'm pretty sure you're already friends with me on Steam. So. I'm glad you think it's worth it, Gecko. Zombies. Yes, zombies are amazing. It's a lot of fun. I so wanted to cash in on the Steam sale and buy like 50 copies of the game so that I could just give them away all year and not have to pay full price. But alas, you can no longer store up a gift inventory. I was so sad. It was so sad. That's not true. I'm not always offline. Lies. Lies and falsifications. Here, let me see. Am I on Steam right now? Yeah, look at that. I'm online right now on Steam. See? Total lies. Anyway, we're going to pick up with one of the poems that we had, because we had started reading poems before stream. And then we'll get back into Murder on the Links. This was looking similar to a crime that had occurred some years before. And Madame Daubreil. Apparently 8 balls offline for your answer. Madame Daubreil had been involved in a murder that was substantially similar to the current one. They had also discovered a body which appeared to be a new murder, but it was believed, in fact, that the person died of natural causes prior to the first murder and then was stabbed with the murder weapon for the first murder. Hey, Sparky. Glad you're here. Let's see. It got a little convoluted. So the person who died of natural causes was stabbed with the murder weapon, which was stolen when Hastings was trying to show off for a pretty girl, and left her and the unattended with the murder weapon, and then left the shed where the body and the murder weapon and everything were secured unlocked so that anybody could have gone in. And then whoever took the murder weapon stabbed the dead body and placed it in, I believe, the garden shed where the tools were. Well, I think that was it. Also, we discovered that the matchbook and the cigarettes were a red herring, meant to throw suspicion on mysterious men from Santiago. Yeah, Hastings. Not impressed with that guy. Hey, 8-Ball. Should Hastings be fired? What, are you on strike today? What the heck, 8-Ball? You don't get a day off. I'm not going to pay you for that. All right. Well, let's see about getting our poem ready. We are going to read Sympathy. Well, I mean, I provide him power and storage and whatnot. That's essentially payment, right? I mean, gives him the necessities to continue to exist. Here, I'll give him one more try. But then we are going to go ahead and go into our poem reading and then the story. So, 8-Ball. Should Hastings be fired? Apparently I need to like, follow, and subscribe my own channel. Well, you guys, if you haven't already, should like, follow, and subscribe, of course, if you're listening live or listening to the recording. But let's dig in. We are going to be reading another poem by Paul Laurence Dunbar. This one's entitled Sympathy. And we'll go ahead and transition over to our reading screen. All right. I know what the cage bird feels, alas, when the sun is bright on the upland slopes, when the wind stirs soft through the springing grass, and the river flows like a stream of glass, when the first bird sings and the first bud opes, and the faint perfume from its chalice steals. I know what the cage bird feels. I know why the cage bird beats his wings till its blood is red on the cruel bars, for he must fly back to his perch and cling when he fain would be on bough a swing. And a pain still throbs in the old scars, and they pulse again with a keener sting. I know why he beats his wing. I know why the cage bird sings, ah me, when his wing is bruised and his bosom sore, when he beats his bars and he would be free. It is not a carol of joy or glee, but a prayer that he sends from his heart's deep core, but a plea that upward to heaven he flings. I know why the cage bird sings. Pretty powerful poem. All right. Chapter 18 of The Murder on the Links. I'm not an expert poet, so I am, or a master of poetry or anything of the sort. So I'm afraid I am not the best person to... Oh, thanks, Sparky. Thanks so much. But if anybody wants to discuss some of the poems that we read in the Discord, please jump into the Discord and open up the conversation on them. I'd love to learn more about the pieces myself. Chapter 18. Gerard Acts. By the way, Perrault, I said, as we walked along the hot white road, I've got a bone to pick with you. Really? Hastings has a bone to pick with him? He doesn't get to criticize anybody at this point. I thought you were saying indeed that I wasn't a expert on poetry. I thought you were giving me grief. Ah, okay. I dare say you meant well, but really, it was no business of yours to go mooching round to Hotel de Phare without letting me know. Perrault shot a quick sidelong glance at me. And how did you know I had been there? He inquired. Much to my annoyance, I felt the color rising in my cheeks. I happened to look in passing, I explained, with as much dignity as I could muster. I rather feared Perrault's banter, but to my relief, and somewhat to my surprise, he only shook his head with a rather unusual gravity. If I have offended your susceptibilities in any way, I demand pardon of you. You will understand better soon. But, believe me, I have striven to concentrate all my energies on the case. Oh, it's all right, I said, mollified by the apology. I know it's only that you have my interests at heart, but I can take care of myself all right. Perrault seemed about to say something further, but checked himself. Pretty sure Perrault did not say he was looking out for Hastings' love life. Arrived at the villa, Perrault led the way up to the shed where the second body had been discovered. He did not, however, go in, but paused by the bench which I have mentioned before as being set some few yards away from it. After contemplating it for a moment or two, he paced carefully from it to the hedge which marked the boundary between the Villa Genevieve and the Villa Marguerite. Then he paced back again, nodding his head as he did so. Returning again to the hedge, he parted the bushes with his hands. With good fortune, he remarked to me over his shoulder, Mademoiselle Marthe may find herself in the garden. I desire to speak to her, and would prefer not to call formally at the Villa Marguerite. Ah, all is well. There she is. Psst, mademoiselle. Psst, un moment, s'il vous plaît. I joined him at the moment that Martha Daubreil, looking slightly startled, came running up to the hedge at his call. A little word with you, mademoiselle, if it is permitted. Certainly, Monsieur Perrault. Despite her acquiescence, her eyes looked troubled and afraid. Mademoiselle, do you remember running after me on the road the day that I came to your house with the examining magistrate? You asked me if anyone were suspected of the crime. And you told me 2 Chileans. Her voice sounded rather breathless, and her left hand stole to her breast. Will you ask me the same question again, mademoiselle? What do you mean? This. If you were to ask me that question again, I should give you a different answer. Someone is suspected, but not a Chilean. Who? The word came faintly between her parted lips. Monsieur Jacques Renaud. What? It was a cry. Jack? Impossible! Who dares to suspect him? Gerard. Gerard. The girl's face was ashy. I am afraid of that man. He is cruel. He will... She broke off. There was courage gathering in her face, and determination. I realized in that moment that she was a fighter. Perrault, too, watched her intently. You know, of course, that he was here on the night of the murder, he asked. Yes, she replied mechanically. He told me. It was unwise to have tried to conceal the fact, ventured Perrault. Yes, she replied impatiently, but we cannot waste time on regrets. We must find something to save him. He is innocent, of course, but that will not help him with a man like Gerard, who has his reputation to think of. He must arrest someone, and that someone will be Jack. The facts will tell against him, said Perrault, You realize that?" She faced him squarely and used the words I had heard her say in her mother's drawing room. "I am not a child, monsieur. I can be brave and look facts in the face. He is innocent, and we must save him." She spoke with a kind of desperate energy, then was silent, frowning as she thought. "Mademoiselle," said Poirot, observing her keenly, "is there not something that you are keeping back that you could tell us?" She nodded perplexedly. "Yes, there is something, but I hardly know whether you will believe it. It seems so absurd." "At any rate, tell us, mademoiselle." "It is this. Monsieur Gerard sent for me, as an afterthought, to see if I could identify the man in there." She signed with her head toward the shed. "I could not. At least, I could not at the moment. But since I've been thinking, well, it seems so queer, and yet I am almost sure. I will tell you. On the morning of the day Monsieur Renaud was murdered, I was walking in the garden here, when I heard a sound of men's voices quarreling. I pushed aside the bushes and looked through. One of the men was Monsieur Renaud, and the other was a tramp, a dreadful-looking creature in filthy rags. He was alternately whining and threatening. I gathered he was asking for money. But at that moment, Maman called me from the house, and I had to go. That is all. Only, I'm almost sure that the tramp and the dead man in the shed are one and the same." Poirot uttered an exclamation. "But why did you not say so at the time, mademoiselle?" "Because at first it only struck me that the face was vaguely familiar in some way. The man was differently dressed, and apparently belonged to a superior station in life. But tell me, Monsieur Poirot, is it not possible that this tramp might have attacked and killed Monsieur Renaud, and taken his clothes and money?" "It is an idea, mademoiselle," said Poirot slowly. "It leaves a lot unexplained, but it is certainly an idea. I will think of it." A voice called from the house. "Maman," whispered Martha, "I must go," and she slipped away through the trees. "Come," said Poirot, and taking my arm, turned in the direction of the villa. "What do you really think?" I asked, in some curiosity. "Was that story true, or did the girl make it up in order to divert suspicion from her lover?" "It is a curious tale," said Poirot, "but I believe it to be the absolute truth. Unwittingly, Madame Martha told us the truth on another point, and incidentally gave Jacques Renaud the lie. Did you notice his hesitation when I asked him if he saw Martha Daubreil on the night of the crime? He paused, and then said yes. I suspected that he was lying. It was necessary for me to see Mademoiselle Martha before he could put her on her guard. 3 little words gave me the information I wanted. When I asked her if she knew that Jacques Renaud was here that night, she answered, 'He told me.' Now, Hastings, what was Jacques Renaud doing here on that eventful evening? And if he did not see Mademoiselle Martha, whom did he see?" "Surely, Poirot," I cried aghast, "you cannot believe that a boy like that would murder his own father." "Mon ami," said Poirot, "you continue to be of a sentimentality unbelievable. I have seen mothers who murdered their little children for the sake of the insurance money. After that, one can believe anything." "And the motive?" "Money, of course. Remember that Jacques Renaud thought that he would come into half his father's fortune at the latter's death." "But the tramp, where does he come in?" Poirot shrugged his shoulders. "Gerard would say he was an accomplice, and a man who helped young Renaud to commit the crime, and who was conveniently put out of the way afterward." "But the hair round the dagger, the woman's hair?" "Ah," said Poirot, smiling broadly, "that is the cream of Gerard's little jest. According to him, it is not a woman's hair at all. Remember that the youths of today wear their hair brushed straight back from the forehead with pomade or hair wash to make it lie flat. Consequently, some of the hairs are of considerable length." "And do you believe that too?" "No," said Poirot with a curious smile, "for I know it to be the hair of a woman, and more, which woman?" "Madame Daubreil," I announced positively. "Perhaps," said Poirot, regarding me quizzically. But I refused to allow myself to get annoyed. What What are we going to do now? I asked as we entered the hall of Villa Genevieve. I wish to make a search amongst the effects of Monsieur Jacques Renaud. That is why I had to get him out of the way for a few hours. But will not Giraud have searched already? I asked doubtfully. Of course. He builds a case, as a beaver builds a dam, with a fatiguing industry. But he will not have looked for the things that I am seeking. In all probability, he would not have seen their importance if they stared him in the face. Let us begin. Neatly and methodically, Perrault opened each drawer in turn, examined their contents, and returned them exactly to their places. It was a singularly dull and uninteresting proceeding. Perrault waded on through collars, pajamas, and socks. A purring noise outside drew me to the window. Instantly, I became galvanized into life. "Perrault," I cried, "a car has just driven up. Giraud is in it, and Jacques Renaud, and 2 gendarmes." "Sacre tonnerre," growled Perrault. "That animal of a Giraud! Could he not wait? I shall not be able to replace the things in this last drawer with the proper method. Let us be quick." Unceremoniously, he tumbled out the things on the floor, mostly ties and handkerchiefs. Suddenly, with a cry of triumph, Perrault pounced on something, a small square cardboard, evidently a photograph. Thrusting it into his pocket, he returned the things pell-mell to the drawer, and seizing me by the arm, dragged me out of the room and down the stairs. In the hall stood Giraud, contemplating his prisoner. "Good afternoon, Monsieur Giraud," said Perrault. "What have we here?" Giraud nodded his head towards Jack. "He was trying to make a getaway, but I was too sharp for him. He is under arrest for the murder of his father, Monsieur Paul Renaud." Perrault wheeled to confront the boy, who leaned limply against the door, his face ashy pale. "What do you say to that, jeune homme?" Jacques Renaud stared at him stonily. "Nothing," he said. I feel like maybe you ought to at least ask for an attorney, right? Chapter 19. I use my gray cells. I was dumbfounded. Wait. Hastings uses his gray cells? This is unheard of. I don't believe it's possible. Surely he made a mistake. I was dumbfounded. Up to the last, I had not been able to bring myself to believe Jacques Renaud guilty. I had expected a ringing proclamation of his innocence when Perrault challenged him. But now, watching him as he stood, white and limp against the wall, and hearing the damning admission fall from his lips, I doubted no longer. But Perrault had turned to Giraud. "What are your grounds for arresting him?" "Do you expect me to give them to you?" "As a matter of courtesy, yes." Giraud looked at him doubtfully. He was torn between a desire to refuse rudely and the pleasure of triumphing over his adversary. "You think I have made a mistake, I suppose," he sneered. "It would not surprise me," replied Perrault with a soupçon of malice. Giraud's face took on a deeper tinge of red. "Eh bien, come in here. You shall judge for yourself." He flung open the door of the salon, and we passed in, leaving Jacques Renaud in the care of the 2 other men. "Now, Monsieur Perrault," said Giraud, laying his hat on the table, and speaking with the utmost sarcasm, "I will treat you to a little lecture on detective work. I will show you how we moderns work." "Bien," said Perrault, composing himself to listen. "I will show you how admirably the old guard can listen." And he leaned back and closed his eyes, opening them for a moment to remark, "Do not fear that I shall sleep. I will attend most carefully." "Of course," began Giraud. "I soon saw through all that Chilean tomfoolery. 2 men were in it, but they were not mysterious foreigners. All that was a blind." "Very creditable so far, my dear Giraud," murmured Perrault, "especially if that clever trick of theirs with the match and cigarette end." Giraud glared, but continued. "A man must have been connected with the case in order to dig the grave. There is no man who actually benefits by the crime, but there was a man who thought he would benefit. I heard of Jacques Renaud's quarrel with his father, and of the threats that he had used. The motive was established. Now, as to means. Jacques Renaud was in Merlinville that night. he concealed the fact, which turned suspicion into certainty. Then we found a second victim, stabbed with the same dagger. We know when that dagger was stolen. Captain Hastings here can fix the time. Jack Renault, arriving from Cherbourg, was the only person who could have taken it. I have accounted for all the other members of the household. Perrault interrupted. You are wrong. There is one other person who could have taken the dagger. You refer to Monsieur Stoner. He arrived at the front door in an automobile, which had brought him straight from Calais. Ah, believe me, I have looked into everything. Monsieur Jacques Renault arrived by train. An hour elapsed between his arrival and the moment he presented himself at the house. Without doubt, he saw Captain Hastings and his companion leave the shed, slipped in himself, and took the dagger, stabbed his accomplice in the shed, who was already dead. Gerard shrugged his shoulders. Possibly he did not observe that. He may have judged him to be sleeping. Without doubt, they had a rendezvous. In any case, he knew this apparent second murder would greatly complicate the case, which it did. But it could not deceive Monsieur Gerard, murmured Perrault. You mock yourself at me, but I will give you one last irrefutable proof. Madame Renault's story was false, a fabrication from beginning to end. We believe Madame Renault to have loved her husband, yet she lied to shield his murderer. For whom will a woman lie? Sometimes for herself, usually for the man she loves, always for her children. That is the last, the irrefutable proof. You cannot get round it. Gerard paused, flushed and triumphant. Perrault regarded him steadily. That is my case, said Gerard. What have you to say to it? Only that there is one thing you have failed to take into account. What is that? Jack Renault was presumably acquainted with the planning out of the golf course. He knew that the body would be discovered almost at once when they started to dig the bunker. Gerard laughed out loud. But it is idiotic what you say there. He wanted the body to be found. Until it was found, he could not presume death and would have been unable to enter into his inheritance. I saw a quick flash of green in Perrault's eyes as he rose to his feet. Then why bury it, he asked softly. Reflect, Gerard. Since it was to Jack Renault's advantage that the body should be found without delay, why dig a grave at all? Gerard did not reply. The question found him unprepared. He shrugged his shoulders as though to intimate that it was of no importance. Perrault moved toward the door. I followed him. There's one more thing that you have failed to take into account, he said over his shoulder. What is that? The piece of lead piping, said Perrault, and left the room. 1 second. So clearly it was the butler with the pipe in the conservatory. Since we haven't found a candlestick so far. Jack Renault still stood in the hall, with a white, dumb face, but as we came out of the salon, he looked up sharply. At the same moment, there was the sound of a footfall on the staircase. Mrs. Renault was descending it. At the sight of her son, standing between the two myrmidons of the law, she stopped as though petrified. Oh, it's always the butler. Didn't you know that? Jack, she faltered. Jack, what is this? He looked up at her, his face set. They have arrested me, mother. What? She uttered a piercing cry, and before anyone could get to her, swayed and fell heavily. We both ran to her and lifted her up. In a moment, Perrault stood up again. She has cut her head badly on the corner of the stairs. I fancy there is a slight concussion also. If Gerard wants a statement from her, he will have to wait. She will probably be unconscious for at least a week. Denise and Francois had run to their mistress, and leaving her in their charge, Perrault left the house. He walked with his head bent down, frowning thoughtfully at the ground. For some time I did not speak, but at last I ventured to put a question to him. Do you believe, then, in spite of all appearances to the contrary, that Jack Renault may not be guilty? Perrault did not answer at once, but after a long wait he said gravely, I do not know, Hastings. There is just a chance of it. Of course, Gerard is all wrong, wrong from beginning to end. If Jack Renaud is guilty, it is in spite of Gerard's arguments, not because of them. And the gravest indictment against him is known only to me. What is that? I asked, impressed. If you would use your gray cells and see the whole case clearly as I do, you too would perceive it, my friend. This was what I called one of Perrault's irritating answers. He went on without waiting for me to speak. Let us walk this way to the sea. We will sit on that little mound there, overlooking the beach, and review the case. You shall know all that I know, but I would prefer that you should come at the truth by your own efforts, not by my leading you to by the hand. In other words, he's saying, think, dummy. We established ourselves on the grassy knoll, as Perrault had suggested, looking out to sea. From farther along the sand, the cries of the bathers reached us faintly. The sea was of the palest blue, and the halcyon calm reminded me of the day we had arrived at Merlinville, my own good spirits, and Perrault's suggestion that I was fey. What a long time seemed to have elapsed since then, and in reality it was only 3 days. Think, my friend, said Perrault's voice encouragingly. Arrange your ideas. Be methodical. Be orderly. That is the secret of success. I endeavored to obey him, casting my mind back over all the details of the case. And reluctantly, it seemed to me that the only clear and possible solution was that of Gerard, which Perrault despised. I reflected anew. If there was daylight anywhere in the direction of Madame Daubreil, Gerard was ignorant of her connection with the Baraldi case. Perrault had declared the Baraldi case to be all-important. It was there I must seek. I was on the right track now. And suddenly, I started as an idea of bewildering luminosity shot into my brain. Trembling, I built up my hypothesis. You have a little idea, I see, mon ami. Capital. We progress. I sat up and lit a pipe. Perrault, I said, it seems to me we have been strangely remiss. I say we, although I dare say I would be nearer the mark. But you must pay the penalty of your determined secrecy. So I say again, we have been strangely remiss. There is someone we have forgotten. And who is that? Inquired Perrault with twinkling eyes. George Canu. I believe that was Madame Daubreil's original lover. From the previous murder case. Chapter 20. An amazing statement. The next moment, Perrault embraced me warmly. In fine, you have arrived, and all by yourself. It is superb. Consider your reasoning. You are right. Decidedly we have done wrong to forget Georges Canu. I was so flattered by the little man's approval that I could hardly continue. But at last I collected my thoughts and went on. Georges Canu disappeared 20 years ago, but we have no reason to believe that he is dead. Aucunement, agreed Perrault. Proceed. Therefore, we will assume that he is alive. Exactly. Or that he was alive until recently. De mieux en mieux. We will presume, I continued, my enthusiasm rising, that he has fallen on evil days. He has become a criminal, a tramp, a what you will. He chances to come on to Merlinville. There he finds the woman he has never ceased to love. Eh? The sentimentality, warned Perrault. Where one hates, one also loves, I quoted or misquoted. At any rate, he finds her there, living under an assumed name. But she has a new lover, the Englishman Renaud. Georges Canu, the memory of old wrongs rising in him, quarrels with this Renaud. He lies in wait for him as he comes to visit his mistress, and stabs him in the back. Then, terrified at what he has done, he starts to dig a grave. I imagine it likely that Madame Daubreil comes out to look for her lover. She and Canu have a terrible scene. He drags her into the shed, and there suddenly falls down in an epileptic fit. Now supposing Jack Renaud to appear, Madame Daubreil tells him all, points out to him the dreadful consequences to her daughter if this scandal of the past is revived. His father's murderer is dead. Let them do their best to hush it up. Jack Renaud consents, goes to the house and has an interview with his mother, winning her over to his point of view. I'm not sure this counts as using your brain cells. Primed with the story that Madame Daubreil has suggested to him, she permits herself to be gagged and bound. There, Poirot. What do you think of that? I leaned back, flushed with the pride of successful reconstruction. Poirot looked at me thoughtfully. I think that you should write for the kinema, mon ami, he remarked at last. You mean? It would make a good film, the story that you have recounted to me there, but it bears no sort of resemblance to everyday life. I admit I haven't gone into all the details, but you have gone further. You have ignored them magnificently. What about the way the two men were dressed? Do you suggest that after stabbing his victim, Queneau removed his suit of clothes, donned it himself, and replaced the dagger? I don't see that matters, I objected rather huffily. He may have obtained clothes and money from Madame Daubreil by threats earlier in the day. By threats, eh? You seriously advance that supposition? Certainly. He could have threatened to reveal her identity to the Renaults, which would probably have put an end to all hopes of her daughter's marriage. You are wrong, Hastings. He could not blackmail her, for she had the whip hand. George Queneau, remember, is still wanted for murder. A word from her and he is in danger of the guillotine. I was forced, rather reluctantly, to admit the truth of this. Your theory, I remarked acidly, is doubtless correct as to all the details. My theory is the truth, said Poirot quietly, and the truth is necessarily correct. In your theory, you made a fundamental error. You permitted your imagination to lead you astray with midnight assignations and passionate love scenes. But investigating crime, we must take our stand upon the commonplace. Shall I demonstrate my methods to you? Oh, by all means, let us have a demonstration. Seriously, Hastings is way too arrogant. Poirot sat very upright and began, wagging his forefinger emphatically to emphasize his points. I will start, as you started, from the basic fact of George Queneau. Now, the story told by Madame Belrodi in court as to the Russians was admittedly a fabrication. If she was innocent of connivance in the crime, it was concocted by her, and by her only, as she stated. If, on the other hand, she was not innocent, it might have been invented by either her or George Queneau. Now, in this case, we meet the same tale. As I pointed out to you, the facts render it very unlikely that Madame Daubreil inspired it. So we turn to the hypothesis that the story had its origins in the brain of Georges Queneau. Very good. Georges Queneau, therefore, planned the crime with Madame Renaud as his accomplice. She is in the limelight, and behind her is a shadowy figure whose alias is unknown to us. Now, let us go carefully over the Renaud case from the beginning, setting down each significant point in its chronological order. You have a notebook and pencil? Good. Now, what is the earliest point to note down? The letter to you? That was the first we knew of it, but it is not the proper beginning of the case. The first point of any significance, I should say, is the change that came over Monsieur Renaud shortly after arriving in Merlinville, and which is attested to by several witnesses. We also have to consider his friendship with Madame Daubreil and the large sums of money paid over to her. From thence, we can come directly to the 23rd of May. Poirot paused, cleared his throat, and signed to me to write. 23rd of May. Monsieur Renaud quarrels with his son over latter's wish to marry Martha Daubreil. Son leaves for Paris. 24th May. Monsieur Renaud alters his will, leaving entire control of his fortune in his wife's hands. 7th of June. Quarrel with tramp in the garden, witnessed by Martha Daubreil. Letter written to Monsieur Hercule Poirot imploring assistance. Telegram sent to Jacques Renaud, bidding him proceed by the Anzora to Buenos Aires. Chauffeur Masters sent off on a holiday. Visit of a lady that evening. As he is seeing her out, his words are, "Yes, yes, but for God's sake, go now." Poirot paused. There, Hastings, take each one of those facts one by one, consider them carefully by themselves and in relation to the whole, and see if you do not get a new light on the matter. I endeavored conscientiously to do as he had said. After a moment or two, I said rather doubtfully, "As to the first points, the question seems to be whether we adopt the theory of blackmail or of an infatuation for this woman." "Blackmail, decidedly. You heard what Stoner said as to his character and habits." Mrs. Renaud did not confirm this view, I argued. "We have already seen that Madame Renaud's testimony cannot be relied upon in any way. We must trust to Stoner on that point. Still, if Renaud had an affair with a woman called Bella, there seems no inherent improbability in his having another with Madame Daubreil." "None whatever, I grant you, Hastings. But did he?" "The letter, Perrault. You forget the letter." "No, I do not forget. But what makes you think that letter was written to Monsieur Renaud?" "Why, it was found in his pocket, and that is all," cut in Perrault. "There was no mention of any name to show to whom the letter was addressed. We assumed it was to the dead man because it was in the pocket of his overcoat. Now, mon ami, something about that overcoat struck me as unusual. I measured it and made the remark that he wore his overcoat very long. That remark should have given you to think." "I thought you were just saying it for the sake of saying something," I confessed. "Ah, que dire! Later you observed me measuring the overcoat of Monsieur Jacques Renaud. Eh bien, Monsieur Jacques Renaud wears his overcoat very short. Put those two facts together with a third, namely that Monsieur Jacques Renaud flung out of the house in a hurry on his departure for Paris, and tell me what you make of it." "I see," I said slowly, as the meaning of Perrault's remarks bore in upon me. "That letter was written to Jacques Renaud, not to his father. He caught up the wrong overcoat in haste and agitation." Perrault nodded. "Precisamente. We can return to this point later. For the moment, let us content ourselves with accepting the letter as having nothing to do with Monsieur Renaud, père, and pass to the next chronological event. May 23rd, I read. Monsieur Renaud quarrels with his son over latter's wish to marry Martha Daubreil. Son leaves for Paris. I don't see anything much to remark upon there, and the altering of the will the following day seems straightforward enough. It was the direct result of the quarrel." "We agree, mon ami, at least to the cause. But what exact motive underlay this procedure of Monsieur Renaud's?" I opened my eyes in surprise. Anger against his son, of course. Yet he wrote him affectionate letters to Paris. "So Jacques Renaud says, but he cannot produce them. Well, let us pass from that. Now we come to the day of the tragedy. You have placed the events of the morning in a certain order. Have you any justification for that?" "I have ascertained that the letter to me was posted at the same time as the telegram was dispatched. Masters was informed he could take a holiday shortly afterward. In my opinion, the quarrel with the tramp took place anterior to these happenings." "I do not see that you can fix that definitely, unless you question Mademoiselle Daubreil again." "There is no need. I am sure of it. And if you do not see that, you see nothing, Hastings." I looked at him for a moment. "Of course, I am an idiot. If the tramp was Georges Canu, it was after the stormy interview with him that Monsieur Renaud apprehended danger. He sent away the chauffeur, Masters, whom he suspected of being in the other's pay. He wired to his son and sent for you." A faint smile crossed Perrault's lips. "You do not think it strange that he should use exactly the same expressions in his letter as Madame Renaud used later in her story? If the mention of Santiago was a blind, why should Renaud speak of it, and, what is more, send his son there?" "It is puzzling, I admit, but perhaps we shall find some explanation later. We come now to the evening and the visit of the mysterious lady. I confess that fairly baffles me, unless it was Madame Daubreil, as Francois all along maintained." My friend, where are your wits wandering? Remember the fragment of check, and the fact that the name Bella Duveen was faintly similar to Stoner, and I think we may take it for granted that Bella Duveen is the full name of Jack's unknown correspondent, and that it was she who came to the Villa Genevieve that night. Whether she intended to see Jack, or whether she meant all along to appeal to his father, we cannot be certain. But I think we may assume that this is what occurred. She produced her claim upon Jack, probably showed letters that he had written her, and the older man tried to buy her off by writing a check. This she indignantly tore up. The terms of her letter are those of a woman genuinely in love, and she would probably deeply resent being offered money. In the end, he got rid of her, and here are the words that he used are significant. Yes, yes, but for God's sake go now, I repeated. They seem to me a little vehement, perhaps. That is all. That is enough. He was desperately anxious for the girl to go. Why? Not only because the interview was unpleasant. No, it was the time that was slipping by, and for some reason, time was precious. Why should it be, I asked, bewildered. That is what we ask ourselves. Why should it be? But later, we have the instant of the wristwatch, which again shows us that time plays a very important part in the crime. We are now fast approaching the actual drama. It is 10:30 when Bella Duveen leaves, and by the evidence of the wristwatch, we know that the crime was committed, or at any rate that it was staged, before 12 o'clock. We have reviewed all the events anterior to the murder. There remains only one unplaced. By the doctor's evidence, the tramp, when found, had been dead at least 48 hours, with a possible margin of 24 hours more. Now, with no other facts to help me than those we have discussed, I placed the death as having occurred on the morning of June 7th. I stared at him, stupefied. But how? Why? How can you possibly know? Because only in that way can the sequence of events be logically explained. Mon ami, I have taken you step by step along the way. Do you not now see what is so glaringly plain? My dear Poirot, I can't see anything glaring about it. I did think I was beginning to see my way before, but now I'm hopelessly fogged. Poirot looked at me sadly and shook his head. Mon Dieu, but it is a triste, a good intelligence, and so deplorably lacking in method. There is an exercise most excellent for the development of the little gray cells. I will impart it to you. So, get good, noob. For heaven's sake, not now. You really are the most irritating of fellows, Poirot. For goodness sake, get on and tell me who killed Monsieur Rodon. That is just what I'm not sure of as yet. But you said it was glaringly clear. We talk at cross purposes, my friend. Remember, it is 2 crimes we are investigating, for which, as I pointed out to you, we have the necessary 2 bodies. There, n'avez-vous impatience? No impatience, please, basically. I explain all. To begin with, we apply our psychology. We find 3 points at which Monsieur Renaud displays a distinct change of view and action. 3 psychological points, therefore. The first occurs immediately after arriving in Merlinville. The second, after quarreling with the son on a certain subject. And the third, on the morning of June 7th. Now, for the 3 causes. We can attribute number 1 to meeting Madame Daubreil. Number 2 is indirectly connected with her, since it concerns a marriage between Monsieur Renaud's son and her daughter. But the cause of number 3 is hidden from us. We have to deduce it. Now, mon ami, let me ask you a question. Who do we believe to have planned this crime? Georges Quenu, I said doubtfully, eyeing Poirot warily. Exactly. Now, Gerard laid it down as an axiom that a woman lies to save herself, the man she loves, and her child. Since we are satisfied that it was Georges Quenu who dictated the lie to her, and as Georges Quenu is not Jacques Renaud, follows that the third case is put out of court. And still, attributing the crime to Georges Quenu, the first is equally so. So we are forced to the second, that Madame Renaud lied for the sake of the man she loved, or in other words, for the sake of Georges Quenu. You agree to that? Yes, I admitted. It seems logical enough. Bien. Madame Renaud loves Georges Quenu. Who, then, is Georges Quenu? The tramp. Have we any evidence to show that Madame Renaud loved the tramp? No, but... Very well, then. Do not cling to the theories where facts no longer support them. Ask yourself instead whom Madame Renaud did love. I shook my head, perplexed. My oui, you know perfectly. Who did Madame Renaud love so dearly that when she saw his dead body, she fell down in a swoon? I stared, dumbfounded. Her husband, I gasped. Poirot nodded. Her husband, or Georges Quenu, whichever you like to call him. I rallied myself. But it's impossible. How impossible? Did we not just agree now that Madame Daubreil was in a position to blackmail Georges Canu? Yes, but... And did she not very effectively blackmail Monsieur Renaud? That may be true enough, but... And is it not a fact that we know nothing of Monsieur Renaud's youth and upbringing? That he springs suddenly into existence as a French-Canadian exactly 22 years ago? All that is so, I said more firmly, but you seem to me to be overlooking one salient point. What is it, my friend? Why, we have admitted Georges Canu planned the crime. That brings us to the ridiculous statement that he planned his own murder. Eh bien, mon ami, said Poirot placidly. That is just what he did do. All right, let's take a short intermission, and then we'll get back to the story with Chapter 21. So, what do you guys think? I'm thinking that the reason he objected to the marriage was that they're actually siblings. What do you guys think? Secret siblings? Well, that's an excellent question. Maybe the body of the husband is actually the chauffeur, and the real husband took off in the car pretending to be the chauffeur. Anybody else have any theories? See what 8 Ball says. I'm certain that my mother knew nothing about that. Let's try one more time. Anybody agree with 8 Ball? You think one of the Daubreils murdered Jacques Rodon or Georges Canu? Oh, sorry about the yawns. Yawns and stretches. So, after this story, Vel had suggested either Jules Verne or Arthur Conan Doyle. Anybody else have any ideas? For the midweek mysteries. Do you think that Cinderella might be Bella Duveen? I certainly think it's possible. You're gonna inflict a heavy book on me at some point? Why? Like smacking me with it or like requesting it? Okay. All right. Well, let's jump back into it. I do think it's odd that Perot hasn't brought her up. Yep. Maybe they are even siblings to Martha Daubreil. I mean, just to make it thoroughly screwed up. How bad would it be if Jack was in love and dating both of his sisters? That would be a daytime television level twist, right? Okay, did not mean to click on that one. We're not ending, I promise. Not yet, anyway. Maury or Game of Thrones, either one. All right. Chapter 21. Hercule Poirot on the case. In a measured voice, Poirot began his exposition. It seems strange to you, mon ami, that a man should plan his own death. So strange that you prefer to reject the truth as fantastic and to revert to a story that in reality is 10 times more impossible. Yes, Monsieur Renaud planned his own death, but there's one detail that perhaps escapes you. He did not intend to die. I shook my head, bewildered. But no, it is all most simple, really, said Poirot kindly. For the crime that Monsieur Renaud proposed, a murderer was not necessary, as I told you, but a body was. Let us reconstruct, seeing events this time from a different angle. Georges Quenu flies from justice to Canada. There, under an assumed name, he marries and finally acquires a vast fortune in South America. But there is a nostalgia upon him for his own country. 20 years have elapsed. He is considerably changed in appearance, besides being a man of such eminence that no one is likely to connect him with a fugitive from justice many years ago. He deems it quite safe to return. He takes up his headquarters in England, but intends to spend the summers in France. And ill fortune, that obscure justice which shapes men's ends, and will not allow them to evade the consequences of their acts, takes him to Merlinville. There, in the whole of France, is the one person who is capable of recognizing him. It is, of course, a gold mine to Madame Daubreil, and a gold mine of which she is not slow to take advantage. He is helpless, absolutely in her power, and she bleeds him heavily. And then the inevitable happens. Jack Renaud falls in love with the beautiful girl he sees almost daily and wishes to marry her. That rouses his father. At all costs he will prevent his son marrying the daughter of this evil woman. Jack Renaud knows nothing of his father's past, but Madame Renaud knows everything. She is a woman of great force of character and passionately devoted to her husband. They take counsel together. Renaud sees only one way of escape: death. He must appear to die, in reality escaping to another country, where he will start again under an assumed name, and where Madame Renaud, having played the widow's part for a while, can join him. It is essential that she should have control of the money, so he alters his will. How they meant to manage the body business originally, I do not know. Possibly an art student's skeleton, and a fire or something of the kind. But long before their plans have matured, an event occurs which plays into their hands. A rough tramp, violent and abusive, finds his way into the garden. There is a struggle. Monsieur Renaud seeks to eject him, and suddenly the tramp, an epileptic, falls down in a fit. He is dead. Monsieur Renaud calls his wife. Together they drag him into the shed. As we know, the event occurred just outside, and they realize the marvelous opportunity that has been vouchsafed them. The man bears no resemblance to Monsieur Renaud, but he is middle-aged, of a usual French type. That is sufficient. I rather fancy that they sat on the bench up there, out of earshot from the house, discussing matters. Their plan was quickly made. The identification must rest solely on Madame Renaud's evidence. Jacques Renaud and the chauffeur, who had been with his master 2 years, must be got out of the way. It was unlikely that the French women servants would go near the body, and in any case, Renaud intended to take measures to deceive any one of them not likely to appreciate details. Masters was sent off, a telegram dispatched to Jack, Buenos Aires being selected to give credence to the story that Renaud had decided upon. Having heard of me as a rather obscure elderly detective, he wrote his appeal for help, knowing that, when I arrived, the production of the letter would have a profound effect upon the examining magistrate, which of course it did. They dressed the body of the tramp in a suit of Monsieur Renaud's, and left his ragged coat and trousers by the door of the shed, not daring to take them into the house. And then, to give credence to the tale Madame Renaud was to tell, they drove the airplane dagger through his heart. That night, Monsieur Renaud will first bind and gag his wife, and then, taking a spade, will dig a grave in that particular spot of ground where he knows bunker is to be made. It is essential that the body should be found. Madame Daubreil must have no suspicions. On the other hand, if a little time elapses, any dangers as to identity will be greatly lessened. Then, Monsieur Renaud will don the tramp's rags and shuffle off to the station, where he will leave unnoticed by the 12:10 train. Since the crime will be supposed to have taken place 2 hours later, no suspicion can possibly attach to him. You see now his annoyance at the inopportune visit of the girl Bella. Every moment of delay is fatal to his plans. He gets rid of her as soon as he can, however. Then, to work. He leaves the front door slightly ajar, to create the impression that the assassins left that way. He binds and gags Madame Renaud, correcting his mistake of 22 years ago, when the looseness of the bonds caused suspicion to fall upon his accomplice, but leaving her primed with essentially the same story as he had invented before, proving the unconscious recoil of the mind against unoriginality. The night is chilly, and he slips on an overcoat over his underclothing, intending to cast it into the grave with the dead man. He goes out by the window, smoothing over the flower beds carefully, and thereby furnishing the most positive evidence against himself. He goes out to the lonely golf links, and he digs, and then— "Yes, and then," said Poirot gravely, "the justice that he has so long eluded overtakes him. An unknown hand stabs him in the back. Now, Hastings, you understand what I mean when I talk of 2 crimes. The first crime, the crime that Monsieur Renaud in his arrogance asked us to investigate. Ah, but he made a famous mistake there. He misjudged Hercule Poirot, is solved. But behind it lies a deeper riddle, and to solve that will be difficult, since the criminal, in his wisdom, has been content to avail himself of the devices prepared by Monsieur Renaud. It has been a particularly perplexing and baffling mystery to solve. A young hand, like Giraud, who does not place any reliance on the psychology, is almost certain to fail." "You're marvelous, Poirot," I said, with admiration. "Absolutely marvelous. No one on earth but you could have done it." I think my praise pleased him. For once in his life he looked almost embarrassed. "Ah, then you no longer despise poor old Papa Poirot. You shift your allegiance back from the human foxhound." His term for Giraud never failed to make me smile. "Rather. You've scored over him handsomely." "That poor Giraud," said Poirot, trying unsuccessfully to look modest. "Without doubt, it is not all stupidity. He has had mauvaise chat. I can't even do the French there. Once or twice. That dark hair coiled round the dagger, for instance. To say the least, it was misleading." "To tell the truth, Poirot," I said slowly, "even now I don't quite see. Whose hair was it?" Madame Renaud's, of course. That is where again, came in. Her hair, dark originally, is almost completely silvered. It might just as easily have been a gray hair, and then, by no conceivable effort, could Gerard have persuaded himself it came from the head of Jacques Renaud. But it is all of a piece. Always the facts must be twisted to fit the theory. Did not Gerard find the traces of two persons, a man and a woman, in the shed? And how does that fit in with his reconstruction of the case? I will tell you. It does not fit in, and so we shall hear no more of them. I ask you, is that a methodical way of working? The great Gerard is nothing but a toy balloon, swollen with its own importance. But I, Hercule Poirot, whom he despises, will be the little pin that pricks the big balloon. Comme ça. And he made an expressive gesture. Then, calming down, he resumed. Without doubt, when Madame Renaud recovers, she will speak. The possibility of her son being accused of the murder never occurred to her. How should it, when she believed him safely at sea on board the Anzora? Ah, what une femme, Hastings! What force, what self-command! She only made one slip. On his unexpected return, it does not matter now. And no one noticed, no one realized the significance of those words. What a terrible part she has had to play, poor woman. Examine the shock when she goes to identify the body and, instead of what she expects, sees the actual lifeless form of the husband she had believed miles away by now. No wonder she fainted. But since then, despite her grief and her despair, how resolutely she has played her part, and how the anguish of it must wring her. She cannot say a word to set us on the track of the real murderers. For her son's sake, no one must know that Paul Renaud was Georges Quenu, the criminal. Final and most bitter blow, she has admitted publicly that Madame Daubreil was her husband's mistress, for a hint of blackmail might be fatal to her secret. How cleverly she dealt with the examining magistrate when he asked her if there was any mystery in her husband's past life. Nothing so romantic, I am sure, Monsieur le Juge. It was perfect, the indulgent tone, the soupçon of sad mockery. At once Monsieur Hotet felt himself foolish and melodramatic. Yes, she is a great woman. If she loved a criminal, she loved him royally. Poirot lost himself in contemplation. One thing more, Poirot. What about the piece of lead piping? You do not see? To disfigure the victim's face so that it would be unrecognizable. It was that which first set me on the right track, and that imbecile of a Gerard, swarming all over it to look for match-ends. Did I not tell you that a clue of 2 feet long was quite as good as a clue of 2 inches? Well, Gerard will sing small now, I observed hastily, to lead the conversation away from my own shortcomings. Hastings led the conversation away hastily. Okay. As I said before, Willie, if he has arrived at the right person by the wrong method, he will not permit that to worry him. But surely, I paused as I saw the new trend of things. You see, Hastings, we must now start again. Who killed Monsieur Rodon? Someone who was near the villa just before 12 o'clock that night. Someone who would benefit by his death. The description fits Jacques Renaud only too well. The crime need not have been premeditated. And then the dagger. I started. I had not realized that point. Of course, I said. The second dagger we found in the tramp was Mrs. Renaud's. There were 2 then. Certainly, and since there were duplicates, it stands to reason that Jacques Renaud was the owner. But that would not trouble me so much. In fact, I have a little idea as to that. No, the worst indictment against him is again psychological. Heredity, mon ami, heredity. Like father, like son. Jacques Renaud, when all is said or done, is the son of Georges Quenu. His tone was grave and earnest, and I was impressed in spite of myself. What is your little idea that you mentioned just now? I asked. For answer, Poirot consulted his turnip-faced watch, and then asked, What time is the afternoon boat from Calais? About 5, I believe. That will do very well. We shall just have time. You're going to England? Yes, my friend. Why? To find a possible witness. Who? With a rather peculiar smile upon his face, Perrault replied, "Miss Bella Duveen." "But how will you find her? What do you know about her?" "I know nothing about her, but I can guess a great deal. We may take it for granted that her name is Bella Duveen, and since that name was faintly familiar to Monsieur Stoner, though evidently not in connection with the Renault family, it is probable that she is on the stage. Jacques Renault was a young man with plenty of money and 20 years of age. The stage is sure to have been the home of his first love. It tallies, too, with Monsieur Renault's attempt to placate her with a check. I think I shall find her help all right, especially with the help of this." And he brought out the photograph I had seen him take from Jacques Renault's drawer. "With love from Bella" was scrawled across the corner, but it was not that which held my eyes fascinated. The likeness was not first-rate, but for all that it was unmistakable to me. I felt a cold sinking, as though some unutterable calamity had befallen me. It was the face of... Anybody have any guesses? Indeed, it was the face of Cinderella. There goes Hastings, always going for women in love with somebody else. In this case, both of them in love with Jack. Chapter 22. I Find Love. Okay. For a moment or two, I sat as though frozen, the photograph still in my hand. Then, summoning all my courage to appear unmoved, I handed it back. At the same time, I stole a quick glance at Perrault. Had he noticed anything? But to my relief, he did not seem to be observing me. Anything unusual in my manner had certainly escaped him. He rose briskly to his feet. "We have no time to lose. We must make our departure with all dispatch. All is well. The sea, it will be calm." In the bustle of departure, I had no time for thinking. But once on board the boat, secure from Perrault's observation. Probably. Maybe more of a hasty proposal. He, as usual, was practicing the method most excellent of Lauvière. I pulled myself together and attacked the facts dispassionately. How much did Perrault know? Was he aware that my acquaintance of the train and Bella Duveen were one and the same? Why had he gone to Hotel du Phare? On my behalf, as I believed? Or had I only fatuously thought so, and was this visit undertaken with a deeper and more sinister purpose? But in any case, why was he bent on finding this girl? Did he suspect her of having seen Jacques Renault commit the crime? Or did he suspect... But that was impossible. The girl had no grudge against the elder Renault, no possible motive for wishing his death. What had brought her back to the scene of the murder? I went over the facts carefully. She must have left the train at Calais, where I parted from her that day. No wonder I had been unable to find her on the boat. If she had dined in Calais and then taken a train out to Merlinville, she would have arrived at the Villa Genevieve just about the time that Francois said. What had she done when she left the house just after 10? Presumably either gone to a hotel or returned to Calais. And then? The crime had been committed on Tuesday night. On Thursday morning she was once more in Merlinville. Had she ever left France at all? I doubted it very much. What kept her there? The hope of seeing Jacques Renault? I had told her, as at the time we believed, that he was on the high seas en route to Buenos Aires. Possibly she was aware that Anzora had not yet sailed, but to know that she must have seen Jack. Was that what Perrault was after? Had Jacques Renault, returning to see Martha Daubreil, come face to face instead with Bella Duveen, the girl he had heartlessly thrown over? I began to see daylight. If that were indeed the case, it might furnish Jack with the alibi he needed. Yet under those circumstances, his silence seemed difficult to explain. Why could he not have spoken out boldly? Did he fear for this former entanglement of his to come to the ears of Martha Daubreil? I shook my head, dissatisfied. The thing had been harmless enough, A foolish boy and girl affair, and I reflected cynically that the son of a millionaire was not likely to be thrown over by a penniless French girl, who moreover loved him devotedly, without a much graver cause. Altogether, I found the affair puzzling and unsatisfactory. I disliked intensely being associated with Poirot in hunting this girl down, but I could not see any way of avoiding it without revealing everything to him, and this, for some reason, I was loath to do. Poirot reappeared brisk and smiling at Dover, and our journey to London was uneventful. It was past 9 o'clock when we arrived, and I supposed that we should return straight away to our rooms and do nothing till the morning. But Poirot had other plans. "We must lose no time, mon ami. The news of the arrest will not be in the English papers until the day after tomorrow, but still, we must lose no time." I did not quite follow his reasoning, but I merely asked how he proposed to find the girl. "You remember Joseph Aarons, the theatrical agent?" "No? I assisted him in a little matter of a Japanese wrestler. A pretty little problem. I must recount it to you one day. He, without doubt, will be able to put us in the way of finding out what we want to know." It took us some time to run Mr. Aarons to earth, and it was after midnight when we finally managed it. He greeted Poirot with every evidence of warmth, and professed himself ready to be of service to us in any way. "There's not much about the profession I don't know," he said, beaming genially. "Eh bien, Monsieur Aarons, I desire to find a young girl called Bella Duveen." "Bella Duveen. I know the name, but for the moment I can't place it. What's her line?" "That I do not know, but here is her photograph." Mr. Aarons studied it for a moment, then his face lighted. "Got it!" He slapped his thigh. "The Dulcibella kids, by the Lord." "The Dulcibella kids? That's it. They're sisters, acrobats, dancers, and singers. Give quite a good little turn. They're in the provinces somewhere, I believe, if they're not resting. They've been on in Paris for the last 2 or 3 weeks. Can you find out for me exactly where they are?" "Easy as a bird. You go home, and I'll send you round the dope in the morning." With this promise, we took leave of him. He was as good as his word. About 11 o'clock the following day, a scribbled note reached us. "The Dulcibella sisters are on at the palace in Coventry. Good luck to you." Without more ado, we started for Coventry. Poirot made no inquiries at the theater, but contented himself with booking stalls for the variety performance that evening. The show was wearisome beyond words. Or perhaps it was only my mood that made it seem so. Japanese families balanced themselves precariously. Would-be fashionable men, in green evening dress and exquisitely slicked hair, reeled off society patter and danced marvelously. Stout prima donnas sang at the top of the human register. A comic comedian endeavored to be Mr. George Rogeby, and failed signally. At last, the number went up which announced the Dulcibella kids. My heart beat sickeningly. There she was. There they both were, the pair of them. One flaxen-haired, one dark, matching as to size, with short, fluffy skirts and immense buster-brown bows. They looked a pair of extremely piquant children. They began to sing. Their voices were fresh and true, rather than thin and music-hally, but attractive. It was quite a pretty little turn. They danced neatly and did some clever little acrobatic feats. The words of their songs were crisp and catchy. When the curtain fell, there was a full meed of applause. Evidently, the Dulcibella kids were a success. Suddenly, I felt that I could remain no longer. I must get out into the air. I suggested leaving to Poirot. "Go, by all means, mon ami. I amuse myself and will stay to the end. I will rejoin you later." It was only a few steps from the theater to the hotel. I went up to the sitting room, ordered a whiskey and soda, and sat drinking it, staring meditatively into the empty grate. Then I heard the door open and turned my head, thinking it was Poirot. Then I jumped to my feet. It was Cinderella who stood in the doorway. She spoke haltingly, her breath coming in little gasps. "I saw you in front, you and your friend. When you got up to go, I was waiting outside and followed you. Why are you here, in Coventry? What were you doing there tonight? Is the man who was with you the detective?" She stood there, the cloak she had wrapped around her stage dress slipping from her shoulders. I saw the whiteness of her cheeks under the rouge, and heard the terror in her voice. And in that moment I understood everything, understood why Poirot was seeking her, and what she feared, and understood at last my own heart. "Yes," I said gently. "Is he looking for me?" she half whispered. Then, as I did not answer for a moment, she slipped down by the big chair and burst into violent, bitter weeping. I knelt down by her, holding her in my arms and smoothing the hair back from her face. "Don't cry, child. Don't cry, for God's sake. You're safe here. I'll take care of you. Don't cry, darling. Don't cry. I know everything." A marriage proposal in 3, 2, 1. "Oh, but you don't." "I think I do." And after a moment, as her sobs grew quieter, I asked, "It was you who took the dagger, wasn't it?" "Yes. And that was why you wanted me to show you round, and why you pretended to faint?" Again she nodded. It was a strange thought to come to me at the moment, but it shot into my mind that I was glad her motive was what it had been, rather than the idle and morbid curiosity I had accused her of at the time. How gallantly she had played her part that day, inwardly racked with fear and trepidation as she must have been. Poor little soul, bearing the burden of a moment's impetuous action. "Why did you take the dagger?" I asked presently. She replied, as simply as a child, "I was afraid there might be finger marks on it." "But didn't you remember that you had worn gloves?" She shook her head as though bewildered, and then said slowly, "Are you going to give me up to the police?" "Good God, no." Her eyes sought mine long and earnestly, and then she asked in a little quiet voice that sounded afraid of itself, "Why not?" And here it comes. It seemed a strange place and a strange time for a declaration of love, and God knows, in all my imagining, I had never pictured love coming to me in such a guise. But I answered simply and naturally enough, "Because I love you, Cinderella." She bent her head down, as though ashamed, and muttered in a broken voice, you can't, not if you knew." And then, as though rallying herself, she faced me squarely and asked, "What do you know, then?" "I know that you came to see Mr. Renaud that night. He offered you a check, and you tore it up indignantly. Then you left the house." I paused. "Go on. What next?" "I don't know whether you knew that Jack Renaud would be coming that night, or whether you just waited about on the chance of seeing him. But you did wait about. Perhaps you were just miserable and walked aimlessly, but at any rate, just before 12 you were still near there, and you saw a man on the golf links." Again I paused. I had leapt to the truth in a flash as she entered the room. But now the picture rose before me even more convincingly. I saw vividly the peculiar pattern of the overcoat on the dead body of Monsieur Renaud, and I remembered the amazing likeness that had startled me into believing for one instant that the dead man had risen from the dead when his son burst into the conclave in our salon. "Go on," repeated the girl steadily. "I fancy his back was to you, but you recognized him, or thought you recognized him. The gait and the carriage were familiar to you, and the pattern of his overcoat." I paused. "You told me in the train on the way from Paris that you had Italian blood in your veins, and that you had nearly gotten into trouble once with it. You used a threat in one of your letters to Jack Renaud. When you saw him there, your anger and jealousy drove you mad, and you struck. I don't believe for a minute that you meant to kill him, but you did kill him, Cinderella." She had flung up her hands to cover her face, and in a choked voice she said, You're right. I can see it all as you tell it." Then she turned on me almost savagely. "And you love me? Knowing what you do, how can you love me?" "I don't know," I said, a little wearily. "I think love is like that, a thing one cannot help. I have tried, I know, ever since the first day I met you, and love has been too strong for me." And then suddenly, when I least expected it, she broke down again, casting herself down on the floor and sobbing wildly. "Oh, I can't," she cried. "I don't know what to do. I don't know which way to turn. Oh, pity me, someone, and tell me what to do." Again, I knelt by her, soothing her as best I could. "Don't be afraid of me, Bella. For God's sake, don't be afraid of me. I love you, that's true, but I don't want anything in return. Only let me help you. Love him still if you have to, but let me help you as he can't." It was as though she had been turned to stone by my words. She raised her head from her hands and stared at me. "You think that?" she whispered. "You think that I love Jack Renault?" Then, half laughing, half crying, she flung her arms passionately around my neck and pressed her sweet, wet face to mine. "Not as I love you," she whispered. "Never as I love you." Using him like nobody's business. Her lips brushed my cheek, and then, seeking my mouth, kissed me again and again with a sweetness and fire beyond belief. The wildness of it and the wonder I shall not forget. No, not as long as I live. It was a sound in the doorway that made us look up. Perrault was standing there looking at us. I did not hesitate. With a bound, I reached him and pinioned his arms to his sides. "Quick," I said to the girl. "Get out of here, as fast as you can. I'll hold him." With one look at me, she fled out of the room past us. I held Perrault in a grip of iron. "Mon ami," observed the latter mildly, "you do this sort of thing very well. The strong man holds me in his grasp, and I am helpless as a child. But all this is uncomfortable and slightly ridiculous. Let us sit down and be calm." "You won't pursue her?" "Mon Dieu, no. Am I Gerard? Release me, my friend." Keeping a suspicious eye upon him, for I paid Perrault the compliment of knowing that I was no match for him in astuteness, I relaxed my grip, and he sank into an armchair, feeling his arms tenderly. "It is that you have the strength of a bull when you are aroused, Hastings, and the brains of it. Eh bien, and do you think you have behaved well to your old friend? I show you the girl's photograph, and you recognize it, but you never say a word?" "There was no need if you knew that I recognized it," I said rather bitterly. So Perrault had known all along. I had not deceived him for an instant. "Tut, tut, you did not know that I knew that. And tonight you helped the girl to escape when we have found her with so much trouble. Eh bien, it comes to this. Are you going to work with me or against me, Hastings?" I mean, not really the meaning of it in this context, but sure. For a moment or two I did not answer. To break with my old friend gave me great pain, yet I must definitely range myself against him. Would he ever forgive me, I wondered. He had been strangely calm so far, but I knew him to possess marvelous self-command. "Perrault," I said, "I'm sorry. I admit I behaved badly to you over this. But sometimes one has no choice, and in future I must take my own line." Perrault nodded his head several times. "I understand," he said. The mocking light had quite died out of his eyes, and he spoke with a sincerity and kindness that surprised me. "It is that, my friend, is it not? It is love that has come, not as you imagined it, all cock-a-hoop with fine feathers, but sadly, with bleeding feet. Well, well. I warned you. When I realized that this girl must have taken the dagger, I warned you. Perhaps you remember, but already it was too late. But tell me, how much do you know?" I met his eyes squarely. "Nothing that you could tell me would be any surprise to me, Perrault. Understand that. But in case you think of resuming your search for Miss Duveen, I should like you to know one thing clearly. If you have any idea that she was concerned in the crime, or was the mysterious lady who called upon Monsieur Renault that night, you are wrong. I traveled home from Paris with her that day, and parted from her at Victoria that evening, so it is clearly impossible for her to have been in Merlinville." "Ah," Perrault looked at me thoughtfully. "And you would swear to that in a court of law?" "Most certainly I would." Perrault rose and bowed. "Mon ami, vive l'amour. It can perform miracles. It is decidedly ingenious what you have thought of there. It defeats even Hercule Poirot. Chapter 23. Difficulties Ahead. I should think so. Now he's gone from, like, bumbling idiot screwing up criminal investigation to active interference and committing to committing perjury. After a moment of stress, such as I had just described, reaction is bound to set in. I retired to rest that night on a tone of triumph, but I awoke to realize that I was by no means out of the wood. True, I could see no flaw in the alibi I had so suddenly conceived. I had but to stick to my story, and I failed to see how Bella could be convicted in the face of it. It was not as though there was any old friendship between us that could be raked up, and which might lead them to suspect I was committing perjury. It could be proved that in actual fact I had only seen the girl on 3 occasions. No, I was still satisfied with my idea. Had not even Poirot admitted that it defeated him. But there I felt the need of treading warily. All very well for my little friend to admit himself momentarily nonplussed. I had far too much respect for his abilities to conceive of him as being content to remain in that position. I had a very humble opinion of my wits when it came to matching them against his. Poirot would not take defeat lying down. Somehow or other, he would endeavor to turn the tables on me, and that in the way, and at the moment when I least expected it. We met at breakfast the following morning, as though nothing had happened. Poirot's good temper was imperturbable, yet I thought I detected a film of reserve in his manner which was new. After breakfast, I announced my intention of going out for a stroll. A malicious gleam shot through Poirot's eyes. If it is information you seek, you need not be at pains of deranging yourself. I can tell you all you wish to know. The Dolcebella sisters have cancelled their contract and have left Coventry for an unknown destination. Is that really so, Poirot? You can take it from me, Hastings. I made inquiries the first thing this morning. After all, what else did you expect? True enough, nothing else could be expected under the circumstances. Cinderella had profited by the slight start I had been able to assure her, and would certainly not lose a moment in removing herself from the reach of her pursuer. It was what I had intended and planned. Nevertheless, I was aware of being plunged into a network of fresh difficulties. I had absolutely no means of communicating with the girl, and it was vital that she should know the line of defense that had occurred to me, and which I was prepared to carry out. Of course, it was possible that she might try to send word to me in some way or another, but I hardly thought it likely. She would know the risk she ran of a message being intercepted by Poirot, thus setting him on her track once more. Clearly, her only course was to disappear utterly for the time being. But in the meantime, what was Poirot doing? I studied him attentively. He was wearing his most innocent air, and staring meditatively into the far distant. He looked altogether too placid and supine to give me reassurance. I had learned, with Poirot, that the less dangerous he looked, the more dangerous he was. His quiescence alarmed me. Observing a troubled quality in my glance, he smiled benignly. "You're puzzled, Hastings. You ask yourself why I do not launch myself in pursuit?" "Well, something of the kind. It is what you would do, were you in my place. I understand that. But I am not of those who enjoy rushing up and down a country, seeking a needle in a haystack, as you English say. No, let Mademoiselle Bella Duveen go. Without doubt, I shall be able to find her when the time comes. Until then, I am content to wait." I stared at him doubtfully. Was he seeking to mislead me? I had an irritating feeling that, even now, he was master of the situation. My sense of superiority was gradually waning. I had contrived the girl's escape, and evolved a brilliant scheme for saving her from the consequences of her rash act. But I could not rest easy in my mind. Poirot's perfect calm awakened 1,000 apprehensions. "I suppose, Poirot," I said rather diffidently, "I mustn't ask what your plans are. I've forfeited the right." "But not at all. There is no secret about them. We return to France without delay." We? Precisely, we. You know very well that you cannot afford to let Papa Perot out of your sight. Eh? Is it not so, my friend? But remain in England by all means, if you wish. I shook my head. He had hit the nail on the head. I could not afford to let him out of my sight. Although I could not expect his confidence after what had happened, I could still check his actions. The only danger to Bella lay with him. Gerard and the French police were indifferent to her existence. At all costs, I must keep near Perot. Perot observed me attentively as these reflections passed through my mind, and gave a nod of satisfaction. I am right, am I not? And, as you are quite capable of trying to follow me, disguised with some absurdity such as a false beard, which everyone would perceive, bien entendu, I much prefer that we should voyage together. It would annoy me greatly that anyone should mock themselves at you. Very well, then, but it's only fair to warn you. I know all. You are my enemy. Be my enemy, then. It does not worry me at all. So long as it's all fair and above board, I don't mind. You have to the full the English passion for fair play. Now your scruples are satisfied. Let us depart immediately. There is no time to be lost. Our stay in England has been short but sufficient. I know what I wanted to know. The tone was light, but I read a veiled menace into the words. Still, I began, and stopped. Still, as you say, without doubt you are satisfied with the part you are playing. Me, I preoccupy myself with Jack Renaud. Jack Renaud. The words gave me a start. I had completely forgotten that aspect of the case. Jack Renaud in prison, with the shadow of the guillotine looming over him. I saw the part I was playing in a more sinister light. I could save Bella, yes, but in doing so, I ran the risk of sending an innocent man to his death. I pushed the thought from me with horror. It could not be. He would be acquitted. Certainly he would be acquitted. But the cold fear came back. Suppose he were not. What then? Could I have it on my conscience? Horrible thought. Would it come to that in the end? A decision. Bella or Jack Renaud. The promptings of my heart were to save the girl I loved at any cost to myself. But if the cost were to another, the problem was altered. What would the girl herself say? I remembered that no word of Jack Renaud's arrest had passed my lips. And yet, as yet, she was in total ignorance of the fact that her former lover was in prison charged with a hideous crime which he had not committed. When she knew, how would she act? Would she permit her life to be saved at the expense of his? Certainly she must do nothing rash. Jack Renaud might, and probably would, be acquitted without intervention on her part. If so, good. But if he was not, that was the terrible, the unanswerable problem. I fancied that she ran no risk of the extreme penalty. The circumstances of the crime were quite different in her case. She could plead jealousy and extreme provocation, and her youth and beauty would go for much. The fact that by a tragic mistake it was old Monsieur Renaud, and not his son, who paid the penalty, would not alter the motive of the crime. But in any case, however lenient the sentence of the court, it must mean a long term of imprisonment. No, Bella must be protected. At the same time, Jack Renaud must be saved. How this was to be accomplished, I did not see clearly, but I pinned my faith in Perot. He knew. Come what might, he would manage to save an innocent man. He must find some pretext or other than the real one. It might be difficult, but he would manage it somehow. And with Bella unsuspected and Jack Renaud acquitted, all would end satisfactory. So I told myself repeatedly, but at the bottom of my heart there still remained a cold fear. Just check. That's the end of a chapter, so I'm just checking how long's left in the next chapter. All right. Well, I think I wasn't reading ahead. I was just trying to check chapter read length. God. So suspicious. Well, I'm yawning a bunch, and we're at the end of a chapter. So I think we'll go ahead and close there for today. I am not sus. I am way too obvious to be suspicious. In any case, I do think we'll end there. And let's see if there's anybody to raid today. We could raid Gecko. She's watching this. So maybe we won't raid her. See, I'm funny. Well, you want to go raid Alex? See some World War Z? He isn't there. He fell asleep? Okay. Well, that's useless. Okay. Well, I guess we'll just bid you all good evening. And thank you so much for joining me. If you watch this on the recording or you're watching this now and you haven't already, please join the Discord, click the follow button, and come interact with the community. And we will be doing the subscriber reading tomorrow in the Discord. We're going to be reading some Where the Sidewalk Ends and The Hobbit. That's for subscribers only. If you want to join, you can pick up the subscription on the Patreon. Links are on the screen right now, in the Discord and links channel, and on the About page on Twitch. So pick it up there. These are live readings. They are not recorded. If you are not there, you miss out. So have an excellent evening. Thank you so much for joining me, and we'll see some of you tomorrow and the rest of you on Friday. Good night.